Welcome back to part 3. So now we're actually going to start building the custom models that our app is going to use. For this, at least to get started, we're going to keep this really simple. We're essentially going to have a post model, which is like a tweet or a Instagram post or whatever you want to call it, as well as a comment model. So the comment will have a relationship to the post, so we can get a little bit of foreign key stuff happening and all that fun stuff. So we're going to start by creating another app. So right now we have the access app and the comment app. Common app, not comment. But we're going to make one called content. So for this, we are going to want to do Python manage.py start app, just like before, and we'll make this content. And this is where things like posts, comments, maybe images, maybe whatever else will kind of live. Okay, cool. So we'll want to make sure that we add this to our settings. Otherwise, Django won't know that it exists, and simply we can just do content.apps.contentconfig. Now, let's open up our models file. And here we'll import some of our usual friends, like our get text lazy. We'll keep models imported. We're also going to want to import in our abstract model like we did when we made our user. So we'll import abstract model, and we're going to need access to our user model. So we'll import that as well. And let's create a class. We'll call it post. It's going to inherit abstract model, and we'll get started writing some things. So first of all, we want to have all of our posts will be related to a user. So we're going to do models.foreignkey. And here, the first field we need to put in is actually what model is it? And in that case, it's the user. I like using the word owner. It's like they own the post. You could, of course, just call it user. I've just liked this pattern and use it pretty much everywhere. Verbose name, so we want to give it what's the actual name from in the admin and other presentation layers. So we'll just call it owner, and we can also give it a related name. Now, related name can be a little bit confusing, but basically because we have a foreign key, Django will automatically hook up a relationship between these. So we can essentially, by giving this a related name of posts, we'll be able to go on a specific user. We can say user.posts, and it will return all the posts. So it's like a reverse lookup, basically, rather than doing a query of getting all the posts with that owner ID, et cetera. It just kind of makes it really easy in the ORM. Now, the last thing we have to do is handle the case that a post exists with user 1, but user 1 gets deleted. And there's different different options we have here. In this case, we will do what is called so onDelete equals models.cascade. And the cascade function will basically go, hey, I'm going to, if that user is deleted, we're also going to delete this post. And that's kind of how I want this to work. I want, if the user no longer exists, it goes away. Another option we could do if we wanted was set null. However, that would require this to be an optional field, because as soon as you delete that user, it would become, null. And if this was not an optional field, it would create a database error. So we will use cascade in this case. So usually it's like, if it's not a nullable field, use cascade. If it is a nullable field, use set null. Usually. Okay, so then we have our owner. Next, we want to definitely have a title for our post. And by definitely, I just mean for this example, if you're building something similar that doesn't need a title, just don't do it. So we'll do a char field. We'll call it title. And we have to give char fields a max length. And in this case, 255 seems good for a title. So we'll keep it as that. Next, we're going to have a body field. And rather than a char field, we'll use a text field, because we want this to kind of be like long form content. We could, of course, still have a max length on this, but this will get stored in the database a little bit differently. So we'll use body as a text field. Then lastly, I want to have something called status, and this will be a char field as well. And this will essentially represent whether it's published, whether it's been removed, whether it's still in a draft state. But a nice thing to do in these kind of cases is just to avoid typos and whatnot, we can actually create sort of a subclass here. So there's a class inside of a class now. And we want to extend something called models.textChoices. And we can basically create a few different options here. So draft, for instance, and the first parameter is actually how it will kind of be stored in the database for this char. So lowercase draft makes sense. And then our presentation of it in things like the admin. So draft, that's cool. Let's also have whether it's published, and then we'll have one for removed. And the reason for this is I kind of want to show you how we could do a soft delete pattern in this application, meaning a user can delete something, but it's not going to actually fully delete it from the database. It's just going to mark it as deleted and not show up anymore from their point of view or other users' point of view. So we'll have these different statuses. And then right here, what we can do, we would still give it a something like status, but then we want to give it still a max length, and we could like count these values. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it looks like 9 or 10 or whatever. I'm just gonna make like 16 just to keep it like as a nice happy number. And then also if we had other statuses, we don't have to worry about changing this, hopefully. And then we give it a choices field, and this will essentially do a validation to make sure that whatever gets sent up falls into one of these three. And we can set a default. So by default, I want my posts to be drafts. Users actually have to click a publish button and set it to published. So that's our status. And then, we can, similarly as we did before on the user, we can have a string method just to give it a internal representation, and we'll choose the title as that. So we can just return self.title here. So that's our post model, pretty basic. And let's make one more. We'll make a comment. So this will also extend abstract model. And I'm going to grab this owner thing again, because we're going to have an owner on a comment as well. So now this, will still be a user, but the related name, we're going to call it, we could call it comments, but I'm actually going to call it user comments, and you'll see why in a minute. Actually, we can still call it comments, I realized. So, sorry, no, yes, no. This is correct. Comments, because we want to be able to, query a user potentially and just be like, give me all the comments. We can actually go user.comments and we'd be able to get that. So similar, we'll even use model.cascade. I'm going to copy this, and we're going to make another foreign key, and this will be post. So this is going to be a reference to this post model because a comment goes on a post. So instead, it's not pointed to user, it's pointed to post. We will call this post. And we can also use related name here, and these won't conflict because we're actually going to be either saying, user.comments or post, pick a specific post and give me all the comments. I can go post.comments. So we're actually fine there. And that's just what confused me for a second. I was thinking, oh, they have to be different, but in this case, they do not. Now, in the case that you had, say, like two, like you had an owner and you had like a, I don't know, owner's friend or something, like another relationship to a user, you would have to make the related names different because Django wouldn't know what you're talking about if they were the same. What else does a comment have? Well, it's going to have a body, and it's going to be just a text field. We'll call it body. And similar to what we're doing, I don't want to have a status because we're not going to have draft comments or published comments, but we do want to handle the fact that a comment could be deleted either by, a user, like the user who made it, or maybe the owner of the post, we allow that, or like an admin for moderation purposes. So in this case, we'll just do a flag. So it'll be is deleted, and this will be a models.boolean field, and we'll make the default false, but allow it to, potentially be true. And we want to do a string representation here. And the reason you want to do this is otherwise in the admin, like these things just look funny. It'll just like be called like comment and then like its ID. So it's a little nice to, do this. And maybe I'll, show an example of what that does shortly. Okay, so we now have the comment model and the post model. So I believe, have already added this to our settings. Content.apps.contentconfig. So we should be able to run the migration now. So first we have to make the migrations. And this one will actually look a little more in depth of what's going on here. This isn't something you really need to completely understand, but it's maybe good to do. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Migrations. And here's our initial migration. So essentially it's here's the operations. It's creating a model called post. And it's basically just, taking the things. You'll notice like things like ID and UUID are here. And that's because UUID came from our abstract model. ID just came from the general Django model. We ever created ad, updated ad, title, body, all that kind of stuff. So there's all our stuff for both things. And again, you don't have to understand that, but that's the file that's being made. And then if we make a change, it doesn't modify this file. It's actually going to make a 0002 with the change in it, whether it's you removing a field, renaming a field, adding a new field, that kind of stuff. The idea is you can run these migrations from 0 all the way through in that order, and even go backwards. There's a, you can go forward and reverse in migrations, which is super handy. Okay, so we've now made our migration. Now, usually the next step I like to do is get this configured into the admin. And we've already done this before, so it should be pretty easy. So inside content, there's already an admin.py. It's going to be empty. So I am going to just paste the stuff in because it's pretty basic. Similar to before, we are importing admin, importing the two models we care about, and then we're registering them. I'm just putting some pretty basic stuff for the list display and filter and all that kind of stuff for both that and that. And you can look at more in depth, and we'll probably come back here and modify it at some point. So now let's go python manage.py, run server. And you know what? I realized we did the make migrations, but we didn't actually run the migrations, which is important. That's where it actually gets applied to the database. So there, we've ran it, everything's good. Okay, so let's go here and I'll refresh and I'll log in. And we'll see here we have the content. This is the app, and then the different things in here. So we can go to posts, and let's actually make a post so that we have it for future. So I'm going to choose the owner as admin, and I'm going to, make it say my first post, lorem ipsum, and I'll just set it to published manually there. So I can save this, and clicking save will bring you back to the view you were on before, which is cool. Sometimes you might want to save and continue editing. So, make a change or whatever, save and continue editing. It will keep me on this page, or saving and add another would, basically save this and get you ready to add another one, which I'm not going to do right now. So we have our first post, and let's see if we can add a comment. So add comment. So we have this one here, and we have my first post here, and we go, this is a comment. So this is obviously the same user, posting a comment on the post because we only have one user. And I'll just save this. Okay, great. We have some things in here, and everything is working dandy. Now, just a few things here. So autocomplete fields, that's not anything we've seen before. And this does require one of the packages we installed. If I recall correctly, Django autocomplete filter. And the cool thing about using this is it's only used for like foreign key relationships or even like many-to-many relationships. And you'll see this one has it as well, autocomplete fields for owner and post. And what that actually gives us in the edit field is the ability to actually search, which is nice. But the real value is if you don't have that, this becomes a list view, just a basic like HTML list, like select view, and it will have every single user in the database as an option in here. And imagine you have an app with 10,000 users or whatever. That's a lot of HTML to load. It's bad for like the performance on painting. Like this page will just take forever to load. And same with posts. If you have 100,000 posts, the autocomplete, it's more like lazy loaded, and it loads kind of like with pagination and stuff. It's super handy, and you kind of really need it to scale with Django. You will run into your admin will come really slow without that. So I wanted to point that out. I also wanted to point out, I didn't configure these as detailed as we did for the user admin, just to, access admin. Access admin, we actually put in the add field sets and the field sets. I'm just keeping this simple. If we realize we need to customize it more, we can. It'll just use sort of the default, which this works for our purposes, right? It just pulls all the fields and everything is good. Okay, so we have that. We are great. Let's move on to the next step, which is actually starting our integration with our API. So actually building out our API. Now, this is really we had to get all this other stuff out of the way, and it's super important, and hope you learn a lot, but this is really the core of this series is how do we actually communicate, whether it's with a Flutter app or, a React app or really anything with our API. So we are using something called Django REST Framework. And I will just open it up right here. We've already installed this. We did it during our initial setup. And they have really good docs, really good examples, a good quick start. You know, you can definitely read through this, and I advise I'm not going to cover every single thing in here. That would be, you know, a really long video. But I'm going to do the, you know, what we need for our app. So it's already installed, but what we're going to do is actually start another app. So I'll just click up a few times, and we're going to call this app API. Now this app, although the files will already be here, we actually won't be using models, so I'm actually going to delete it. We're not going to have an admin for our API. We're not going to have view. We are going to have views in our API, but they won't be, you know, the views, they won't be right there. You'll see in a bit. But we're actually going to create this app like this, and we're going to go to our settings again and make sure we install this so that we don't forget. So we can just do api.api config. And I am going to make a new file in here, though, called urls.py. And in here, we're just going to stub something in. So first of all, we're going to import a couple things we'll need from Django utils. From Django URLs, we're going to import include and path. And basically what we can do in this file, this is like kind of like a magic file in the sense that Django is looking for something called urls.py in here. And if we set a variable called URL settings, it will know, sorry, URL patterns, it will know how to work with it. Django is, you know, it's an opinionated framework, which is a great thing in when it's good, because it allows you to not, you know, have to reinvent the wheel every time and write a lot of code. There's patterns already. It's configuration over, you know, creating stuff. And here we might have a path, and in this case, we'll do post. And what's cool is we can then include another URLs file. So it allows us to sort of like just make our base one here, and we might, you know, we'll have another one at some point for comments. Why don't I actually just get that ready? And I'm going to get rid of, it kind of just automatically added that, but really we want to go within API to posts. We're going to have a folder, and we're also going to have a folder called comments. And we'll have a URLs file in there too. So let's stub those in as well. So we're going to make a new folder here inside API called posts. And we'll make a new folder also called comments. And inside posts, we will make a new file called urls.py, and similar with comments. So, okay, we have our posts. And actually, I'm going to, I made a couple of mistakes here. One of them, let's just say URLs. And also, I actually prefer the pattern of keeping these singular, not plural. So we'll call it post and comment rather. It doesn't actually matter. It's not going to change anything. I just prefer this myself. You can do it how you like. Okay, so now we need to just also update these. And inside our post URLs, we're going to import path. And we're also going to set URL patterns in here. And I'm just going to keep it empty. And let's just put that in comment as well. So I'll save that, save that, save that. We're just getting this kind of stubbed and ready to go. Lastly, we need to go into our project URL. So this was a file that came with us. And in here, we're going to add an endpoint for our API. So we'll just do path, and we'll call it API with a slash. And then we're just going to include, which is something we have to import, which we were doing in the other files, include. And in this case, we're going to include api.urls. And let's just have a trailing, not there, but here, trailing comma, just to get these to look nice. So essentially what will happen is, you noticed before we've been going to /admin, and you can actually change this to anything you want. In fact, I usually make it manage instead of admin. It's also like something you can configure an environment variable to not even allow the admin to run in production. Same with your API. It's just Python code, so you can have, you know, an if statement here, all that kind of stuff. But basically /admin would bring us to here, and /API will bring us to api.urls. And in api.urls, it's looking for something called post or comments, and it will go. So this is kind of like cascading through to build this sort of like routing engine for us. So right now, if I did go here and I try to go to /API, let me try this again, API. I will get, well, I'll get an error because we're not running the server. That's true. And this is telling us there's just an issue because we actually don't have any URL patterns in here. So we actually, I guess, need these to actually get started. So I'm going to comment of the comment one just so we don't have to like keep stubbing in temporary things. And then we'll fix the post one. So in post, what we really want to do is if the path is equal to just blank, then we're going to load something, which we haven't created this yet, but we're going to call it post list create view. And I'll just fix this. And this is basically an endpoint to list our posts or create a new one. And fix that typo. And then I'm just going to make this really quick, just temporarily, and we'll fix it after. So we're going to go from views, import post list create view. And that means in our posts, we also need a file called views.py. We also, in any of these subfolders, also want to have an init.py to make it a Python module. Just makes it so that we can actually import and export things properly. So in views, we're going to have a class. If we go back here, we want to call it post list create view. And we'll be doing some stuff here. I'm just going to pass for now and see if we can at least get rid of that error. And this should say as view, not as views. Okay, we do have to just put a little bit more into here. So let's import in some things right here. So we can go from Django, Django REST framework. Okay, and I realized this is just URL patterns, one word. It's not. There we go. We got rid of the circular import error. Okay, so post list create view. I just created something like very basic, and we can kind of ignore what I've done here, but I just want to demonstrate what's really happening here. So if we go /API, we do get an error because there's not actually a, this doesn't, resolve to anything. But if we do API/post, we will see, something come back, which, is different than if I do this. We'll actually have a 404. This is showing me like another error, but it's at least, kind of, showing me something's working. So basically, in short, just to step through this again, we have our project, and we've said /API include API URLs. So that got to our API, and then /post is going to include the post URLs. And because our first parameter is just empty, it's actually just ends at that /, and we're actually now loading this view here, which again, I'm going to just do this. Okay, so let's actually make something now. So I'm going to just open up another terminal so that we can create some files easily. So I'm going to go into our API, and we're going to go into post. And we already have our init.py, we have a views.py. There's a couple more we want. We want to have a filters.py. So I'm just touching these files right now. We also want to have a serializers.py, and we want a querysets.py. Now, it's flexible. You could call these whatever you wanted. You could have all this stuff technically in one file, mostly. But this is just a pattern that I like, filters, query sets, serializers, URLs, and views. And you can think of the path as, you get to the URL, it's going to call a certain view. A certain view is going to do a, database query essentially to get the data back. It might filter it, and then it's going to look at a serializer to actually figure out how do I return this data. So we're going to step through all of this right now, and we're just going to go, we'll start with filters because it's pretty basic. So filters are something that are optional. You don't have to add this for an API endpoint, but it actually allows, the ability for a user to request something, but also filter by a certain thing. And in this case, we might want to filter by the user that made the post, right? And that would be helpful for like a profile page of a user, seeing only their posts. So from here, we need to, first of all, import. So we can do from content.models, import post. So we get our model. And then we also need something from Django filters. And we're going to import filter set and number filter. Okay, now I'm getting an error here, and that's because we have not actually installed Django filters yet. So let us do that. So I need to make sure, I can stop running the server I want, or I need to at least go back to my main directory here. And I need to source the environment, right? Because I don't want to install Django filters outside of my virtual environment. So we'll just do source vnv bin activate. And now I'll do pip install. It's Django-filter. And we'll see that we got this version. So we'll remember to go to our requirements.txt and right here, put that, replace this with an equal sign. Okay, so now we don't have that error anymore. Everything is looking good. And what we're going to create is our post filter. And this will be pretty basic. It's something we can improve on, but it's going to extend something called filter set that's built into the Django filters. And we're going to allow filtering by an owner. And in this case, it's going to be a number filter because we're going to expect the client will send up the user ID. And we just want to set its field name that it's going to look up to as owner. So we're keeping these the same. They don't have to be, but it kind of makes sense. You don't want to have, it's nice to keep your variable names the same across everything so that it's not confusing. Then we just have to add a class meta. And we have to say what model is being used here, and it's post, and we need to say what field. So this should correlate with this. And we can have multiple filters, right? Like say we wanted to filter by the date or something or title, we can have many, but we're just going to have one for now. Okay, so that gets filters out of the way. Query sets. So this is a nice pattern that I like to do where we kind of create what are called query sets in this single file. So we're going to import our post model. And here we're going to do actually, our first Django ORM. We're going to create something called all posts query set. I'm having problems right now because I should just put my caps lock on. And yeah, we could do, post objects at all. So this is our ORM call. We actually call .objects, and then we can say .all, but we can also do .filter. We can do a lot of things, and we'll see this more. But this is basically a database query. Give me all the posts. Cool. But in terms of our all post query set, from the point of view of the API, we never want deleted posts, like removed posts, to leak through in some way. Because from the user's point of view, even if you're the owner of it, it should just be like, this is gone, at least for the logic of my app that I have in mind. So remember, we have this removed status right here. So we want to make sure that we also exclude where status equals post.status.removed. So this is actually how we call this. It's actually post.status.removed. And you will, assuming you have the right plugins installed, you will get, nice little IntelliSense on that. So this just gets rid of the typo. If I thought it was called deleted and I just tried to write deleted, I will see it's just white. It doesn't seem to be working. So we have that all post query set, but I also want to have one for public posts. And here we're just going to do, we're going to take that all post query set, and we're actually going to then filter it again by this. So this is one way to do it. We could also just as easily do this. And in this case right here, this is actually the exact same thing. So I'm just going to do it this way because there's no point kind of like doing this query and like appending more on. It may or may not make it more efficient or less efficient for the database ORM, but this just makes sense to me. We just want all the ones that are published. Okay, so we'll save that. Now we have our query sets. Next, serializers. So serializer is essentially the way we want our data to be represented. And we want to be sending JSON back to the app or the website or whatever. So first things first, we want to import from REST framework serializers. And then we also want to import from content.models our post model. And we won't worry about comment. Okay, so we're going to create something just called post serializer. And yes, it's going to extend serializers.model serializer. So this is built into Django REST framework, and we're just extending it. And we're going to create a class called meta inside here. And we need to say that it is equal to the post. And so this is looking a lot kind of similar to the way filters work. We have a class meta, model, they're based off the same kind of design pattern. And then fields, now we have to say, okay, what fields are we going to be sending back? And in this case, I do want to send the ID back. I want to send the UUID back. I want to send the title of the post back, the body of the post, and maybe also the created at, so we can have a nice little timestamp. Now, because the serializer will also be used for essentially creating posts, we also need to tell it, okay, what are the read-only fields? And in this case, we don't want the user ever trying to send up an ID or a UUID or create that. All that stuff's auto-generated. So we'll just keep it like that. And we also don't want them to be able to send up the owner. That's going to be handled a slightly different way, because if we just allow them to send the owner up, you could essentially, if you know the user ID of someone, you could just post something on their behalf, and that could get you in trouble, or maybe get the other person in trouble. Okay, serializers are done. We already did URLs, but we'll probably have to come back and fix that. And then views. So I started sort of creating this so we could get, kind of show you the pattern, but we're going to fully remove this. I'll keep this one because we need it, but let's figure this out. So we're going to need generic API view. We're also going to get some mix-ins. So these are mix-ins that come with REST framework that allow us not to write very much code to do things like listing, deleting, creating, retrieving, updating based on our serializer. Then we're going to import some of the files that we just created in the last few minutes. So what's cool about Python is we could go, from API.post. whatever, import this. But because we're in the same folder as these, we can actually just go from dot, meaning like this current folder, query sets, import the public post serializer. From serializers, import this. From filters, import this. So a little bit easier. And also, just makes us a bit more portable too. If we ended up, moving stuff around, renaming something, it'll just work. And now we're going to create, this is a pattern I like. It's not required, but I like to create for any model, just kind of like its default. It's sort of like a standard way of working. And then on different views, we actually are going to override it. So this isn't going to be an endpoint that you actually hit. This is just going to kind of set the defaults, and we're going to extend generic API view. And here we can set some defaults. So we're going to make the query set equal to public post query set. We're going to make the serializer class equal to the post serializer, and the filter set class equal to that. Then we can also do a few other fun things here. So we can have search fields. So allowing, if we wanted, our API to be searchable, we could say, okay, things that could potentially be searchable would be the owner's name. Now notice that's a double underbar or underscore, because we're saying like this model and then a property within it. It's not owner name, it's owner and then its name. Like that. And then we also maybe want the title, which does not need the underscore because we're talking about something right on this class. So search fields are cool. We can also do, ordering fields to allow, so this isn't like setting the ordering default or anything. Like it's not something we would do this or whatever. It's saying what could be orderable in the API. And Django REST framework will take care of it if you pass a query parameter of ordering. But then we do need to set a default ordering. And we will just use created app for that. And sorry, this should be ordering, not order. Okay, so this is kind of like, our sort of like defaults, because then what we can do is actually create the endpoint. So we're going to call this post list create view, because it's going to be used for both things. And the reason for that is we have to have a URL that maps to a certain endpoint. And the endpoint for retrieving and creating are actually going to be the same. It's just going to be whether you do it with a post request or a get request. So for this, we want to extend it with the list model mixin, the create model mixin, and then the post API view. We have to do these ones first, and then we do this one. And because we're doing this one, we're also getting the generic API view automatically. And inside here, we can set up our actual requests. And the way Django REST framework works, and you can see kind of get it with my lovely GitHub Copilot, we can override get. So get is part of the generic API view. And so we're kind of overriding it here. And this self.list, we didn't make this. This is actually part of the list model mixin. If I were to remove this, you would see it becomes white. It's like, I don't know what that is. But now that we have that, it just goes. And it works, this will actually just almost work for us, which is pretty cool. The last piece we do need, though, is, remember I mentioned we don't want the owner sent up in the serializer. What we can also override is something called perform create. And you see the options are coming in here. And what we would actually do in our perform create is take our serializer, save it, but set the owner to self.request.user. And this is whatever user is actually making this request, the authenticated user, which I know we haven't got into auth or anything yet, but we're getting this ready for that case. So this will automatically mean whoever hits the create endpoint, whoever's running this create function, before it saves, it's actually going to, or when it saves, it's actually going to just override the owner to be this person. Okay, so that's our post list create view. I'm going to save this because I think we'll get rid of this error that's been showing up because we finally actually have a full flow here. We have our URL, post list create view right here, and this should now work. So what I'm going to do, just to show you the error that we're going to get, let's hit this again. So we still have this similar error because it's saying, hey, I need this REST framework API.html, and we just have to configure our application to work properly. So we're going to go to our settings.py again, and we're going to set a default rendering class. And there are multiple, and you might want to actually use the HTML one when you're trying out because it allows you to actually like interact with it and click links and submit forms and stuff like that. But I generally just go right ahead and use the JSON renderer. So we just have REST framework, default renderer class, REST framework.renders.json renderer. And now what you'll see come back is actually JSON. I have a Chrome extension or Firefox extension rather here, so it looks a little bit pretty for me, but really what you would most likely see is something like this. The actual JSON data coming back. So the ID, the UUID, the title, the body, and that kind of thing. And it's in a list because this is a list view. We're getting multiple things. We happen to only have one right now in our database. So yeah, that's the start of our API. What we'll be doing in the next video is actually allowing people to create. Technically, we have almost everything in place for that already from the posts point of view, but because we don't have any authentication stuff set up, this actually won't work because we'll have self.request.user and that will be null and it'll complain and it will get really mad, and so on and so forth. So we'll get that set up shortly. But one other thing we could do is actually create our retrieve endpoint. So what I'm going to do is we're going to call this post retrieve update destroy view. And this is going to extend the retrieve model mixin, the update model mixin, and the destroy model mixin, and of course our post API view, so that we get all this default stuff and don't have to duplicate it. And we also get the generic API view right there, which we need to have these gets and stuff like that. Now, for now, all I'm going to worry about is the get, because without auth, we can't actually allow updating or patching or destroying, which is, deleting. But we'll put that in there and we'll go back to our URLs and we'll actually create another path. So I'm going to import in this other one, post retrieve. We'll put this here. And what we can do here is actually put in a placeholder here. So we're not going to put, for post 1, post 2, post 3. We're not going to make a whole bunch of things. We're going to essentially use the UUID as a variable. So we do UUID and UUID. So the first one is actually what the field we're using is, and the second one is what type of field it is. One is like the type of field. This could be, string. It could be an integer. In this case, it is a UUID, just so it knows, Django is smart enough to know when it sees what's a UUID, which is a very certain length of characters with hyphens and stuff. It knows to call this. We'll have our trailing slash. And then the one thing we also have to put here just to make it all work magically is we go lookup field equals UUID, so that it knows, I'm going to be looking it up by UUID. Similarly, we can actually do something, and we can do ID int. I might have that backwards. We'll call it, I think it's int and then ID. So type and then what the field is. And in this case, we would just do ID. However, this is the default, so we actually can omit this. So now, if we actually go back here and I copy this UUID, and assuming I saved everything, I believe I did, and actually put this in here with the trailing slash, we essentially get the same thing as before, except the main difference is it's no longer in a list. We're actually just retrieving that single one. And if I change this to a 1, meaning the ID of the post, We have a error there. Maybe I do need that lookup field. Let's put that back in. There we go. So same sort of thing happens. So we do actually need to put the lookup field there. Oh, I know why. We actually, if we make this PK, then we don't need to the lookup field. I got rid of one too many things. So PK meaning primary key. We should be able to hit this now. There you go. Okay, so we have our list endpoint. Now you notice I put two different URLs here, which is totally fine because they have a different shape to them. Django won't try and parse this as an ID if it's just one number or even a few numbers, but it knows to look it up by UUID when the shape of the value feels like a UUID, and similar with just a integer primary key. And then we have our post create, which is what happens when we just hit this. Oops, when we just hit /post, we get all of them back in this nice list. So there, that's a start. We essentially have like a read-only version of our app, at least from the post point of view. And you could go into the admin and you could, make more posts for sure all day and be able to test that this is working. But in the next one, we're going to get some auth set up so that we can actually make this work with our whole CRUD, right? Create, reading, updating, and deleting. Right now, we only have the R of the CRUD.